The impacts of climate change are everywhere, and they're especially felt in agricultural settings. The farmers are very dependent on weather conditions, on high temperatures, on sporadic storms. All of those things can interrupt their careful planning and the way that they've managed their fields. I think most of us are familiar with how our traditional fossil fuel energy system produces the gases that create climate change. When we burn oil in our cars, or we burn natural gas in our homes or industries, that causes carbon dioxide to go into the atmosphere. That is a heat-trapping gas. On the other hand, farmers and others may not be aware that landscapes can also contribute to climate change. Methane is an important greenhouse gas. It's 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide on a mass basis in terms of its global warming potential. So it's especially important to get rid of methane from the atmosphere. And rice is responsible for 8 to 10% of global anthropogenic or man-made methane emissions to the atmosphere. So the alternate wetting and drying method is this strategy of irrigation that allows the farmer to dry out the field surface just a little bit, once or twice in the middle of the summer. So whereas they would normally have a continuous flood, they're using a little bit less water, letting the field dry out. That has multiple benefits. We're particularly excited about the carbon benefits. We're reducing methane emissions from that process because those dry periods allow oxygen to get into the soil and kind of turns off the microbes that produce methane. The farmer's excited about this method because if they get rain during these dry periods, it's kind of free water for them, so they can actually use less water for irrigation. Studies have shown that's between 20 to 40% savings in irrigation. So in a landscape where the groundwater is deeper and deeper because of overpumping, this is one way to be really water smart in rice production. Our research group, where we come in, is we take careful measurements of the gas dynamics over the rice field. So we're actually able to measure the methane production and emission from the field into the atmosphere and do that on neighboring fields over multiple seasons. And we've really been able to show that this alternate wetting and drying irrigation style can significantly reduce methane emissions from the rice fields by 64% without impacting the yield of the rice at all. As we look to the future of the water supply in Arkansas, the aquifers are getting deeper and deeper, further and further from the surface, and so farmers are going to have to take action, changing crops, changing irrigation schemes. So it's something we need to take on now to reduce the risk to the future farmer. A lot of these farms are multi-generational. The farmers want to pass it on to their kids. They're really looking to the future, and they're looking to researchers to provide options for how to irrigate more efficiently.
In the East, back home in Arkansas, conservation means like slowing your faucet down and finding drips and stuff. When we say to conserve water, it's like use less. In the West, conservancy district, or to conserve water, means to build a huge dam and hold it back so you can bank it. The overarching project of the whole district is just to conserve water as best you can so that all these millions of people can drink it and use it. And climate change is making that harder. Instead of building more dams, it's cheaper to just convince your population to stop using as much water. Utah uses the highest water per capita of any state. When you're totally reliant on snowpack like we are to produce the runoff that fills your reservoirs up, for all the municipalities that buy water from us that's treated for drinking water, we have to know how much we have in a reservoir to bank that. And so when climate change comes into that, it's a situation of we're seeing less snowpack. They've even seen snow sublimating, so it doesn't even melt, it just goes to the atmosphere if it's a hot day. If we do get a good snowpack, it melts and it goes straight into our really dry soils. Personally, I care about the Great Salt Lake. Northern Utah is unique because all of our water ends up in one spot and then evaporates. And so we have a pretty good way to measure how much water we're using. A couple weeks ago, there was a report from the state of Utah that said that the lake was the shallowest it's ever been. That's just kind of haunting, because when the lake goes, it becomes a place that's not really habitable. Large saline seas all over the world, the Aral Sea is basically gone. They're all going away because diversions. After the snow melts, they're no longer capturing any runoff because you live in an arid place, and so they rely on inflow from rivers. When those are being diverted for lawns and farms and household use and industrial use, then none of that's going into the lake, and so it's not able to terminate there. But the Great Salt Lake isn't just a local resource for the planet. If you look at bird patterns, there's just huge swaths of all these species converge and stop here. It's a huge flyover. It's a place for them to rest. There's plentiful food with all the brine shrimp and stuff. And the smaller it gets, the more competitive they get for the resource, the less food there is, and the less of them can come down here and make their migration south. The Bear River where we were at today, when it can't flow at its full force and spread out and swamp these wetlands, there's just so much less land for life to happen, and you see a lot of death. We're set to warm 1.5 degrees Celsius, regardless of if we turn off every single spigot of carbon right now, and we're not going to. Well, there's no real plans to. There's hope, but the hope doesn't really lie in us stopping our combustion of carbon immediately. It's a long process. The hope really lies in folks becoming aware of all this and responding to it as best they can. That would be great if it started raining though. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, it's raining. Okay.